I could do a really long, lengthy introduction, but because I've known Hannah for a little while, but I don't know her the way my wife knows her. I remember you playing volleyball in the gym and leaving your shoes in there. Before you may even met my wife, I believe. But my wife knows her in ways that I don't know. And so I'm going to let my wife introduce Hannah this morning, because if you've listened to anything on the radio this weekend, your heart was tugged as you heard stories of what God is doing in the lives of children here in the valley that are battling cancer. But Hannah is a little bit different. And I'm going to shut up and let my wife take it. She's not different weird.
I don't even know if there are words to express how amazingly special I think Hannah Bryant is. And I want to thank her and her family and Brandon, her loyal boyfriend, for being here today. Hannah is a young lady who has been led by God. And God has his hands all over her. I see a lot of miracles in the field of pediatric oncology every day. Hannah is truly, truly a miracle that I cannot explain with any medical facts. God has got his hands on her. I see her story as a testimony of faith, because she has never lost her faith in God. I have never seen her not smile. And I'm sure there have been times, Hannah. But she's one who walks into the room and lights everybody else up.
Right.
So I'm going to let her come and share. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you for the introduction. That was really sweet. She's amazing. She is part of the reason I got through everything, because when I first met Dr. Atkinson, most of the time you don't really think about meeting somebody who's such a strong Christian. And so it was really nice to have such a tragedy hit and have her being there and help me get through it. So this is my first time doing this. I'm a little nervous. So I kind of wrote it down like in a paper. So I'm just going to read it like that, if that's okay. I'm not quite to the note card phase. So I'm getting there. But I also wanted to thank every one of you for praying for me, and thank you for putting me on your prayer list. And I really needed a reading prayer, and so thank you for everything. All right, so I'm just going to start reading. Okay, so 3 years ago, I began my sophomore year of high school, and my life seemed to be on the course for a great year. I was on an advanced honors diploma track, and I had been voted captain of my JV volleyball team. I went on my first date with my boyfriend named Brandon to homecoming, and that November I had just turned 16. By the spring of 2013, I thought I was definitely on top of the world. My travel volleyball team was having the best season we'd ever had. Brandon and I had just started dating after a few months of getting to know each other, and I had learned that flat ironing my long, unruly, curly hair and made it look like I tried. So, in early April, I got my license, and I just knew that I was finally on my way to some freedom. I planned on getting a summer job and to earn my own money. But life had a little bit of a different plan for me. When I was younger, I would always hear people at church and my youth leaders talk about how God has a purpose for everyone's life. So I would pray that God would give me something to do to impact others and be a witness for him. Because I was shy, and he and I both knew there was no way I'd be able to witness to people and speak in front of a crowd. I needed an easy way in. I'm here to tell you, be careful what you pray for. I had not been feeling well that winter, but my mom thought I was tired and irritable because I stayed up too late doing homework, I played volleyball, and I babysat 4 girls on the side. By the spring, I was pale, but I'm a redhead, so I'm always pale. I had also been dieting and lost some weight. By late March, my mom noticed that I had bruises on my legs from my final volleyball tournament, but they were still blue, even though it had been a couple of weeks old. I also lost my appetite. She called my family doctor, who said she could see me in a month later. So on Wednesday, April 24th, I had an appointment and some blood work done. And my doctor said it might have been low iron or maybe even something viral or mono because it had been going around my skull, and that we'd have the results by next week. I didn't know this at the time, but my doctor called my mom at home around 8 p.m. that night, and I told her that my lab work indicated that I might have leukemia. She told her that I needed to be at the Children's Hem-Onc clinic the first thing the next morning for a bone marrow biopsy. She said not to tell me because I would Google it and try to figure it out and see what was going on. But I knew something wasn't right because my mom was really upset for no reason and my dad was quiet. Never a good sign. It wasn't until the next morning when the doctor said, "So I guess you know we're talking about the C word." I was like, "What?" I don't know what you're talking about. But I kind of got it pretty quickly. It would take a few days for the lab results to get back, and there was a small chance it could be a virus that had suppressed my immune system. So we, of course, prayed all that weekend. We didn't tell many people until we knew more, just some family and friends that we had asked to pray, and we tried to watch funny movies and not think about what Monday would bring. I left school early on Monday, April 30th, to go back to the Hem-Onc clinic, and it was there that I heard the 3 words that would forever change the rest of my life. You have cancer. I not only had acute myelogenous leukemia, but I also had the rarest subtype of AML, which is M6A. About 10 to 12 kids a year get it, and it has a very poor prognosis of survival. What can I say? I'm an overachiever. I was 16 and I thought I was on top of the world, but I had just received some of the most devastating news, and now I was facing my own mortality. I told Brandon the news that night, and the next day I broke the news to my volleyball team, and the rest of them are best friends. That night, I couldn't really sleep because I knew that it had hit social media, and the next day school would be a little bit awkward because everybody knew. I'm not the kind of person who has ever liked really getting attention and being in the spotlight. So my mom came into my bedroom, laid down, and we talked. And I told her that I thought I knew why God was letting me go through this. She said, "Enlighten me," because I'm very angry and don't understand. I said, "I think God wants people to see Him in me and see me healed." The next few days were a blur, as my doctor told me that I needed to have my braces removed as soon as possible, one of the perks of cancer, and I would be admitted to the hospital 4 days later to have a blood transfusion that night, and the next day I would have a port surgically placed and begin 10 days of chemotherapy. My sophomore year was over. I tolerated the chemo very well and spent the next 2 weeks in the hospital and then was released to go home. When my doctor told me that I would lose my hair, I told her that it was okay because I had been flat ironing it a lot and caused a lot of split ends. I really could use a do-over. I didn't know it at the time, but I would grow my hair back and lose it a total of 4 times. I had a bone marrow biopsy after the first round of chemo, and we had to wait a month to find out the results because there was a new test they were using to determine if a patient was low risk or high risk for relapse. I did not have any genetic mutations, thankfully, and we were praying that I would not be high risk. High risk indicated that I would most likely need a bone marrow transplant at Duke University Hospital, which meant I would have to leave my home for a few months. Anyone who knows me very well knows that I'm very much a homebody, who didn't really like sleepovers as a kid, and I was not really looking forward to going to college, to having to leave my family, which is, weird for a teenager. So in early June, I got the results back, and it wasn't the news we were hoping for. I was high risk. I was just barely high risk according to the numbers, but along with the rarity of my aggressive cancer, I needed the bone marrow transplant to have the best chance of survival. I spent the next summer in and out of the hospital getting 2 or more rounds of chemo, and for fevers and infections. I was in the hospital in June for 11 days, and it's what we call the bad fever, where I spent 5 days in the PICU with pneumonia. I honestly don't remember much of that stay, but a lot of the people were praying for me because with my weakened immune system, a simple virus or infection can be fatal. Everyone took great care of me at Roanoke Memorial, and I had the best nurses anyone could ever have, and my oncologist, Dr. Atkinson and Dr. Martin, were awesome doctors who took great care of me. In late summer, we started making preparations to go to Duke for transplant, and my medical team there started searching the National Bone Marrow Registry to find a live donor, as my brother was only half a match for me. Apparently it's not always easy to find a match, but they found 3 for me, another answered prayer. I went down to Duke in late September for a ton of baseline tests, blood work, a round of radiation to kill my immune system, and I had the central line placed in my chest. I was admitted on September 26th to receive more chemo. My transplant day was October 1st, my new birthday as nurses call it, and then it was just a waiting game for my new donor cells to find a home in my bone marrow and start grafting. I missed everyone after being in the hospital for so long, especially my family, but my dad and Ben came to visit me on weekends, and Brandon got to visit me a couple times, and a few friends came to see me. The hardest part of transplant for me wasn't the pain, but being away from home. The only complication I had during the 6 weeks I was inpatient was a really bad case of mucositis. That's where radiation and chemo break down the lining of your mouth and your GI tract, and I wasn't able to eat food for a solid month. Some of the kids I was with on the unit had terrible complications with their kidneys, livers, lungs, and 4 of them didn't make it through transplant. This is very hard because we all became a family on Unit 5200. My cells engrafted after 3 weeks, and I got out of the hospital around the 1st of November, but was released to Ronald McDonald House because my immune system was very weak and couldn't go home yet. I had to go to the clinic several times a week for blood work, blood transfusions, and checkups. I was doing really well until right before Christmas when I was taken off my immunosuppressant drugs. My blood counts dropped. They tried to treat it with steroids, and I gained about 30 pounds overnight. So I basically hid from everyone. I was released to go home in mid-January, but I still had to come back to Duke every week for clinic. And my doctor spent the next few weeks trying to figure out why my blood counts were so low. They thought that maybe they were just being pokey or would eventually start rising on their own. But it wasn't to be, and again, life had a different plan. By spring, they started seeing suspicious cells in my blood work, and the dreaded R word was mentioned, relapse. We found ourselves once again praying and begging God that what they had suspected would not be what it was, but that's exactly what it was. I had relapsed and the cancer was back. I spent a week in the hospital getting a round of chemo and losing my hair for the 3rd time. But I tried to enjoy my summer and was trying to lose the prednisone weight. My doctors at Duke spent the next 4 months trying to save my new cells, but by late summer they were mostly gone and my bone marrow was once again full of cancerous cells. It was late August when Dr. Martin sat me down and told us that I needed another transplant or I would die. And I was given a 5 to 10% prognosis of survival. Dr. Martin said that he hadn't decided if he would even let me try a second time because my prognosis was so low, and he thought it wouldn't be ethical to put me through another transplant with such low odds. He gave me some time to think about it to decide whether I wanted to stop treatment and enjoy the time I left or keep fighting. When we returned 3 weeks later for clinic, I gave him a letter that I wrote telling him what I had decided. My nurse practitioner, Andre, said that my letter is what convinced Dr. Martin to let me try again. I'd like to share it with you because my letter helped save my life. Okay, so it says, Dear Dr. Martin, I'm sorry it took me so long to answer you, but I want you to know that I knew my answer as soon as you told me the news. The reason I didn't answer at first is I was in shock, which I know is normal. Anyways, my answer is I want to keep fighting, always. All my life I've never been a quitter. When my brother and I were younger, he would give up on a sport or even a board game if he wasn't winning. I always stuck with the sport or activity until the very end, just because I still had the chance to win. And I guess that's where my logic comes into this situation. If I gave up, I would never enjoy the time I had left, because I knew I would have quit. I would have never forgiven myself for giving up, and I would have been miserable thinking that there still was a chance I could have made it, and try. You didn't tell me I had 0% chance, so that's still a chance worth fighting for. The little time I would have left would have just been a waste in my eyes because I wouldn't be trying to do anything about my illness. My body is obviously strong enough to try again because my major organs didn't get damaged, and I'm not worried about pain either because I'm pretty tough. And apparently so is my DNA. Also, I trust you as my doctor, and I feel like God put me in your care for a reason. I understand that from a medical standpoint my chances aren't great, but I also know that with God all things are possible, and that He is in control. And I believe that with my whole heart. And one last thing I would like to share with you is, through my whole cancer experience, I have held on to a quote by Winston Churchill. If you're going through hell, keep going.
Amen.
And that's exactly what I plan to do, hand Bryant. Basically, we needed a miracle. So that's what everyone began praying for. My doctors at Duke said that I was in good shape physically to have another transplant because I'd suffered no damage to my major organs, which was unusual considering all the runs of chemo and the round of total body radiation I had. They said they couldn't explain why I had not gotten any infections or fevers in the months since I had relapsed because I had very low blood counts and my immune system was severely compromised. They said I should have gotten sick many times over, but everyone was praying for God to protect me from my illness, and He did. In the weeks before I had to leave for transplant again, I tried to enjoy my time at home and asked Dr. Martin if I could spend the fall here because it's my favorite season, and I had missed it the year before because I was inpatient for my first transplant. I also wanted to spend my 18th birthday home, as I had spent my 17th birthday in the hospital at Duke. I tried to mentally prepare myself for leaving home and my family again, and I knew it would be harder on me and Brandon as we were even closer than before. My mom and I decided to make a list of everything we were looking forward to about transplant. Now keep in mind, Durham has Cheesecake Factory and Beef Jakes. We also made a list of everything we were dreading. My mom said she just didn't understand why I had to go through it again because we had already done it once and everyone prayed that I would be healed. I didn't understand it either, but I said that maybe it just wasn't enough. Since I had breezed through the first transplant, maybe God wanted me to go through a second one with a 5 to 10% chance of surviving. And if I did make it, then nobody would be able to say that it was anything but a miracle. I was admitted on December 19th, and I had a second central line placed and started 10 days of chemo. For this transplant, I was getting stem cells from bank cord blood instead of live donor cells. Not because it was any better than a live donor, just different. They said it would take my cells longer to engraft if they had grafted at all, because my marrow might be damaged from chemo and cancer cells. They said I would feel a lot worse and be in the hospital a lot longer. After I was admitted, one of the nurses said that everyone was told things did not look well and my prognosis was very poor. There were many nurses, doctors, and staff members of the family life team at Duke praying for me, though, as well as my doctors and nurses back home at Roanoke, along with my loved ones, my church, and thousands of people I had never even met before, because my name had been put on church prayer lists all across the country. Everything had been going well, and my mom and I had adjusted to life on 5200 once again. My family and I spent Christmas in the hospital, but we made it fun because Christmas is where your family is. My transplant was on December 31st, and my mom and dad, Ben, Brandon, and Andre were there. I was always cold from low blood counts, so I was thankful that I'd be spending the worst of winter months indoors. On New Year's Day, I started having burning neuropathy pain in my hands and feet and spent the next week with them in pans of cold water as nothing else relieved the pain. Apparently, I was allergic to one of the drugs I was on, so they switched me to a different one and the pain finally started subsiding. I spent the next week hallucinating 24/7 because of the high amounts of narcotic painkillers I was on. And of course, my mom videotaped some of them. They're pretty funny to watch now. But after a week of this, she asked my doctors to reduce the narcotics because I was talking to people who weren't there. So they did, and I went to sleep for 3 weeks. Sorry about that, Mom. You were lonely. The flu season was especially bad in North Carolina over the winter, and several of the children on the floor caught it, along with various other viruses and infections. I was one of the only ones who did not catch anything, again surprising my doctors. They said I'm a puzzle that does everything unexpected and right on cue. My cells had grafted 3 weeks later, exactly like first transplant. They were very surprised about it because it should have taken longer, but they started making plans for me to get off all my IV meds and switch to pills so I could be released at the beginning of February. One morning in late January, Dr. Martin came in to see me and said that my blood work and some other symptoms indicated I probably had a condition known as veno-occlusive disease, or VOD. VOD is a possible transplant complication in which blood flow in your liver gets messed up. And it was the one complication that I had been most scared of during both transplants because there is only a 50% cure rate. He said someone would come in a couple hours to do an ultrasound, and in the meantime, my dad sent out an urgent prayer request on Facebook asking everyone to pray that it would not be VOD. After the ultrasound, my primary nurse Jillian came in to tell me that Dr. Martin was shocked because I did not have VOD. She said that she had never seen someone have almost all the symptoms of VOD, and it turned out not to be VOD. But God is good, and I was released to Ronald McDonald House on February 5th. I did not have any platelet transfusions after I got out, and I only had one more blood transfusion. They told me this was highly unusual to not need any transfusions that early in transplant. My blood counts were steadily rising, and I was making my own red blood cells, and we nervously held on to the hope that I had truly been healed this time. In late February, I started having trouble breathing, and I was admitted to Duke for an issue I was having with my lungs. They ran some tests and did a CT scan and a lung biopsy and determined that I had some permanent lung damage, most likely from one of the harsh chemos I had received this time around. I was put on asthma meds and told that I would need to be monitored as the condition could worsen, and it would be a month or two before they knew for sure. It was during this hospital stay that Andre told us my medical team was in awe of my progress, and he said how well I was doing was miracle level. He also told us that they all thought I would be dead by then, or still in the hospital with no quality of life. They don't really sugarcoat anything in cancer plans, by the way, but God is bigger than cancer, and we had asked him for a complete healing for me. I was released after a week and was very upset that I had to be on an oxygen tank to get back to Ronald McDonald House. I was definitely channeling Hazel Grace in Fault in Our Stars, and although I loved the book and the movie, I was not happy about the oxygen tank. My mom sat down with me and said, "Don't worry, this is not what your life is going to be. This is not your new normal, I just know it." And she was right, because I only needed oxygen that night and started feeling better the next day. I had some pulmonary function tests a couple days later and had to repeat them again at the end of March. We decided that it wasn't so bad for me to have some lung damage and be on an asthma inhaler for the rest of my life, considering the fact it could have been so much worse after all the chemo and radiation and 2 transplants. I would have to see a pulmonologist so they could decide if I needed to be permanently put on steroids to manage my lung condition. I was terrified that I might have to take steroids long term, and Dr. Martin didn't want me to be on them either because it would suppress my growing immune system. So we asked everyone to pray, and my dad kept saying that he just didn't believe I was going to have permanent lung damage. In the meantime, tragedy had struck, and my grandparents' home, my mom's childhood home, had burned down, and my papa died 3 weeks later. He had been battling bladder cancer for a long time, and the last time I talked to him, the day after the fire, we both promised each other that we would keep fighting together. I don't understand why those awful things happened, but I do know that God works in mysterious ways, and sometimes He uses cancer to reach people. I've been praying for my papa to be saved ever since I was little. He accepted Christ as his Savior the year before he passed away. Amen. I'm so happy that I will see him again in heaven someday, and I can't wait to tell him that I kept our promise and kept on fighting. I was released to come home from Duke in mid-April, but I had to return a month later for the repeat PFTs and an appointment with the pulmonologist to find out what my treatment moving forward for the lung damage would be. I had another chest CT scan, and it had greatly improved from the one I had when they did the lung biopsy. My PFTs went surprisingly well, and we ran to Andre as quickly as we could and told him before heading to the pulmonologist's office. He said, "Holy cow," and told us not to let her put me on any steroids without consulting Dr. Martin first. We sat nervously in her office, not knowing what it all meant, but she walked in and said, "You don't have any lung damage. Your CT scan is clear." She said I must have had a viral infection in my lungs in February, and it just needed time to clear up, and I didn't need an inhaler anymore. Once again, my medical team was blown away, and our prayers have been answered. I attended a celebration at Duke in May called the Rainbow of Heroes Walk. They have it every year. And at the end, the doctors and nurses released balloons with the names of the children who didn't survive transplant the previous year. 3 of the children I was on the unit with this time didn't make it. And Dr. Martin hugged me and told me that he was glad that I didn't give up and that he didn't have to write my name on a balloon. After I was released back to the care of the medical team in Roanoke, I went to my senior prom, attended my graduation ceremony, and got accepted into JMU University, which I will be moving in on August 25th.
Wow.
JMU is the only college I wanted to attend, and my prayer was that I would be accepted, and I was, even though I haven't actually completed my high school courses yet. I still have 3 classes to finish, so I would appreciate some prayers to get them done this week. I'm so excited to go to college and get back to living a normal life. A year ago, I was told that there was very little chance I would be here right now, but I always had hope that God would give me a future that I asked Him for. During my journey with cancer, whenever I would think about how I wanted to go to college, have a career, eventually get married, buy a house, or have children someday, it struck me that these thoughts never included the word if. As in, if I survive cancer, I hope to go to JMU, or if I make it, I hope to have a family of my own. It was always when I survive cancer. I don't think I'll ever fully understand why I got leukemia, or why I had to go through 2 transplants, but I do know that God has done some awesome things through my battle with cancer. Some people I love dearly got saved. Friends of mine who thought I weren't religious at all told me they'd pray for me. And people who are battling cancer now have said I inspire them to keep fighting because I refuse to give up. But I didn't do any of those things on my own, and it's only by God's strength and mercy that I'm here talking to you today. 3 years ago, I was a shy girl and didn't want any attention focused on me. I couldn't stand the thought of leaving home, and now, as I face leaving college next week, I know that I'm stronger than I ever thought I would be, and now I'm able to impact others' lives, and that truly, with all things, God is true with all things. Oh my goodness, I can't believe I messed up the last line. Alright, let's try this again. And now I'm able to impact others' lives, and that truly, with God, all things are possible.